A shy black intern signed hello to a deaf guest, not knowing the billionaire CEO was watching. "You're wasting your time with that sign language nonsense. This is a professional environment, not a charity. With respect, sir, communication isn't charity. It's the foundation of everything we do here." The executive boardroom of Westfield Communications fell silent. Thomas Blackwood, the silver-haired COO, stood with his arms crossed, glaring down at Elijah Johnson, the 24-year-old black intern who had dared to challenge him. Between them sat an elegant older woman, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her hands frozen mid-sign. Security personnel hovered by the door awaiting orders. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Elijah's heart pounded against his ribs, but his gaze remained steady. Everything he'd worked for, his education, his internship, his future, all hung in the balance of this moment. The deaf woman, Dr. Catherine Mitchell, one of the country's leading economists, looked between the two men, understanding the conflict even without hearing the words. From the doorway, a voice cut through the silence. "Thomas, that's quite enough." All heads turned to see Malcolm Reynolds, the 68-year-old CEO and founder of Westfield Communications, standing in the doorway. His weathered face was unreadable, eyes sharp beneath bushy gray eyebrows. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when Elijah Johnson arrived at Westfield Communications for what he thought would be an ordinary day. 3 hours earlier, Elijah checked his reflection in the elevator's mirrored wall, straightening his tie for the third time. After 6 months as an intern at Westfield Communications, he still felt the need to prove himself every day. Being the only black intern in the corporate program came with its own weight of expectations and scrutiny. "8th floor," the elevator announced, and Elijah stepped out into the gleaming hallway of one of Chicago's most prestigious communications firms. "Morning, Elijah," called out Diane from reception, a kind woman in her 60s who had taken Elijah under her wing from day one. "Big day today, quarterly board meeting. They're bringing in some heavy hitters." "Thanks for the heads up, Ms. Diane," Elijah replied with a warm smile. Diane reminded him of his grandmother, always looking out for him, slipping him insider information about office politics. He stood abruptly. "This is not how we conduct business at Westfield. We don't need theatrical performances from interns who should be fetching coffee, not playing interpreter." The room fell silent. Catherine began to intervene, but Elijah, thinking of his mother and all the times she had been silenced and marginalized, found his voice. "You're wasting your time with that sign language nonsense. This is a professional environment, not a charity. With respect, sir, communication isn't charity. It's the foundation of everything we do here." And that brings us back to where we started. The executive boardroom of Westfield Communications fell silent. Thomas Blackwood stood with his arms crossed, glaring down at Elijah with Dr. Mitchell sitting between them, her hands frozen mid-sign. Security personnel hovered by the door awaiting orders. From the doorway, a voice cut through the silence. "Thomas, that's quite enough." All heads turned to see Malcolm Reynolds standing in the doorway, his weathered face unreadable, eyes sharp beneath bushy gray eyebrows. Malcolm entered the room slowly, his presence commanding attention without effort. 68, he moved with the deliberate pace of someone who knew people would wait for him. "Dr. Mitchell," he said, approaching the table. Then, to everyone's surprise, Malcolm's hands began to move in fluid sign language. "I apologize for being late and for any disrespect you've experienced." The entire room stared in astonishment as Malcolm and Dr. Mitchell engaged in a brief sign conversation. Elijah watched, impressed by the CEO's skill and fluency. Finally, Malcolm turned to address the room. "Dr. Mitchell and I go back 30 years. We met at Gallaudet University when Westfield was first exploring telecommunications options for the deaf community." He looked at Thomas. "Back when we understood that communication companies should actually facilitate communication for everyone." Thomas's face had lost some of its color. "Malcolm, I was simply trying to maintain the professional standards of our meetings by silencing one of our most valuable consultants." Malcolm asked, his voice calm but firm. "By demeaning one of our most promising young talents." He gestured toward Elijah. "The boy was disrupting, the boy," Malcolm interrupted, "was doing exactly what this company was founded to do, breaking down barriers to communication." He turned to Elijah. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Please continue assisting Dr. Mitchell." For the next hour, the meeting proceeded with Elijah interpreting Dr. Mitchell's expert analysis of the Asian markets. Her insights were invaluable, identifying several pitfalls in the current strategy and suggesting alterations that could save millions in the long run. Throughout the meeting, Malcolm occasionally added his own signs, sometimes making Dr. Mitchell smile or nod in agreement. Thomas remained unusually quiet, his earlier confidence deflated. When the meeting concluded, board members filtered out, many stopping to thank Dr. Mitchell and, to Elijah's surprise, complimenting him on his interpreting skills. As the room cleared, Malcolm approached Elijah. "I'd like to speak with you in my office, Mr. Johnson. Dr. Mitchell, would you join us as well?" Catherine caught Elijah's eye and gave him an encouraging nod as they left the boardroom. Malcolm's office was a reflection of the man himself, tastefully appointed but not ostentatious, with photographs chronicling both his business success and his humanitarian efforts. A black-and-white picture from what appeared to be the late 1960s showed a young Malcolm at what Elijah recognized as a civil rights march. "Please, sit." Malcolm gestured to the comfortable chairs facing his desk. He settled into his own chair with a sigh that spoke of the long day's wait. "First, Dr. Mitchell, I want to apologize again for Thomas's behavior. That's not what Westfield stands for." Dr. Mitchell signed her response, which Elijah began to interpret, but Malcolm waved him off gently. "I can understand her, son, but thank you." He turned back to Dr. Mitchell. "Yes, he's always been resistant to change. That's becoming an increasing problem." Malcolm then focused his attention on Elijah. "Tell me, Mr. Johnson, where did you learn to sign so fluently?" "My mother lost her hearing when I was 10, sir." "Workplace accident, inadequate ear protection at the factory where she worked." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "And you chose to apply to Westfield because—" Elijah hesitated, then decided honesty was his best approach. "Because of your company's history with accessibility technology. My mother benefited from some of the early TTY devices Westfield helped develop. I wrote about it in my application essay." "Which clearly Thomas never read," Malcolm said with a hint of disappointment. "Mr. Johnson, how much do you know about Westfield's founding?" "I know you started it in 1972, sir, after working in television production." Malcolm smiled. "That's the short version, yes." He stood and walked to a photograph on the wall showing a much younger version of himself standing next to an older black man in front of a small storefront with a grand opening sign. "This is Joseph Williams, my mentor and business partner when we founded Westfield." What most people don't know is that Joseph was deaf, became so after a bout of meningitis when he was 19. Elijah looked at the photograph with new interest. "Back in '72, there was next to nothing in terms of telecommunications for the deaf community. Joseph and I set out to change that." Malcolm's eyes took on a faraway look. "We were an odd pair in those days, a young white guy who dropped out of engineering school and a middle-aged black deaf man trying to start a communications business in Chicago." Dr. Mitchell signed something, and Malcolm nodded. "Exactly. Those were different times. The world wasn't kind to either of us for different reasons, but especially not to Joseph." Returning to his seat, Malcolm continued. "We built this company on the foundation of making communication accessible to everyone. Our first products were modifications to existing phone technology for the deaf community. That's what got us our first federal contract." He looked directly at Elijah. "Thomas and some of the board have forgotten that. They see only the billions in revenue, not the purpose behind it all." "What happened to Mr. Williams?" Elijah asked. A shadow crossed Malcolm's face. "Joseph passed away in 1994. Cancer. But before he did, he made me promise two things: that Westfield would never lose sight of its mission to connect people, and that we would always be a place where someone like him could succeed." Malcolm leaned forward. "I've been watching you these past 6 months, Mr. Johnson. Catherine speaks very highly of you. But what I saw today, your courage to stand up for what's right, even at potential cost to yourself, that's something that can't be taught in any business school." Elijah felt a surge of pride tempered with uncertainty about where this conversation was heading. "Dr. Mitchell," Malcolm turned to her, signing as he spoke, "what did you think of Mr. Johnson's performance today?" Dr. Mitchell's hands moved eloquently, her expression warm. She signed for nearly a minute with Malcolm nodding occasionally. "She says," Malcolm translated for Elijah, "that your interpreting was excellent, professional, and accurate. But more importantly, you showed something rare in corporate America, genuine respect and understanding. She says you didn't just translate her words, you ensured her voice was heard." Elijah felt a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. That means a lot to me." Malcolm stood again, signaling the meeting was nearing its conclusion. "Mr. Johnson, I have a proposition for you. Westfield is establishing a new division focused on accessible communication technologies, returning to our roots in a sense, but with modern innovations. We're looking for someone to head up the project team." Elijah blinked in surprise. "Sir, it would be a significant promotion from your internship position." Normally, I wouldn't consider someone so early in their career, but your unique combination of skills, your personal connection to the mission, and what I witnessed today tells me you might be exactly what this initiative needs. Dr. Mitchell signed something brief, and Malcolm chuckled. She says I'm understating it, as usual. She thinks you're perfect for the role. Elijah sat in stunned silence, his mind racing to process this unexpected turn of events. I don't know what to say, sir. You don't have to answer immediately. Think about it over the weekend. We can discuss the details on Monday. As they stood to leave, Malcolm added, "One more thing, Mr. Johnson. Thomas Blackwood has been with Westfield for nearly 30 years. He's made valuable contributions, but what happened today was unacceptable. I'll be having a serious conversation with him about his future here." Elijah felt a twinge of discomfort. "Sir, I don't want to be the reason anyone loses their position." Malcolm's expression softened. "You're not. Thomas has been moving away from our core values for years. Perhaps today will be his wake-up call. Sometimes people need to be reminded of what matters." After escorting Dr. Mitchell out, Elijah returned to the marketing department in a daze. Catherine was waiting at his desk, curiosity evident on her face. "So, what happened?" she asked. Elijah told her about Malcolm's offer, still hardly believing it himself. Catherine beamed with pride. "I knew you were special from the day you walked in here. Not many interns read the company's entire historical archives as background research." She squeezed his shoulder. "Malcolm sees what I've seen all along." As the workday wound down, Elijah gathered his things, his mind still processing the day's events. On his way out, he was surprised to see Thomas Blackwood waiting by the elevator. Elijah approached cautiously, unsure what to expect. The older man looked tired, the usual sharpness in his eyes replaced with something like resignation. "Mr. Johnson," Thomas acknowledged him with a nod. "I believe I owe you an apology." Elijah hadn't expected this. "Sir, what I said in the boardroom was inappropriate. I let my personal frustrations affect my professional judgment." The elevator arrived, and they both stepped inside. As the doors closed, Thomas continued, "I've been with Westfield for 28 years. Things were different when I started. The focus was different." He sighed. "Sometimes it's hard to remember that change isn't always a threat." Elijah chose his words carefully. "Mr. Blackwood, I respect your experience and your contributions to the company. I wasn't trying to undermine you today. No, you were doing your job and reminding some of us what this company was supposed to be about." Thomas looked directly at Elijah. "Malcolm told me about the new division and his plans for you." Elijah tensed, wondering if Thomas was going to object. "It's a good choice," Thomas said, surprising him. "You understand both the technology and the human element. That's rare." The elevator reached the lobby, and as they stepped out, Thomas added, "Just don't make the same mistake I did. Sir, don't get so caught up in the business that you forget the purpose behind it." With that, Thomas nodded a goodbye and walked toward the parking garage. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Chicago sidewalks. Elijah decided to walk a few blocks before catching the L train, needing time to process everything. He pulled out his phone and called his mother, using the video relay service. When her face appeared on screen, he began to sign, telling her about his extraordinary day. Her expressions shifted from concern to pride as he recounted the confrontation and its unexpected aftermath. "They want me to head up a new division, Mom," he signed. "Accessible communication technology, it's what they originally founded the company to do." His mother's hands moved quickly in response. "I always told you that you were meant for important things. Your father would be so proud." Elijah felt tears threatening. "I wish he could have seen this." "He sees," his mother signed with conviction. "Now tell me about this CEO who knows sign language." Elijah laughed and continued his story as he walked through the bustling city streets. As he described Malcolm Reynolds and the history of Westfield, he realized that today wasn't just about his career advancement. It was about coming full circle, connecting his personal history with his professional future, honoring both his mother's journey and the legacy of a company founded on the principle that everyone deserves to be heard. That evening, Elijah sat on his small apartment balcony, watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Heard through the grapevine that Thomas had a 2-hour meeting with Malcolm this afternoon. Word is he's going to be working closely with your new division. Interesting times ahead." Elijah smiled, thinking about the unexpected turns life could take. 3 days ago, he was just an intern trying to prove himself. Now he was about to lead a division that represented the heart and soul of what Westfield Communications was meant to be. On Monday morning, Elijah arrived at Westfield earlier than usual, his mind clear and his decision made. He would accept Malcolm's offer and pour everything he had into making the new accessible technology division a success. As he stepped off the elevator on the executive floor for his meeting with Malcolm, he was surprised to see Dr. Mitchell waiting in the reception area. "Good morning," he signed, smiling warmly at her. "Good morning," she signed back. "Malcolm asked me to join your meeting. I hope you don't mind." Before Elijah could respond, Malcolm's assistant ushered them into his office. Malcolm was seated at his desk, and to Elijah's surprise, Thomas Blackwood was also present, looking somewhat uncomfortable but composed. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming," Malcolm said, rising to greet them. "I hope you've had time to consider my proposal." "I have, sir," Elijah replied confidently, "and I'd be honored to accept the position." Malcolm smiled broadly. "Excellent. I've asked Dr. Mitchell to serve as a consultant for the division. Her expertise in both economics and the needs of the deaf community will be invaluable." Dr. Mitchell signed that she was looking forward to working together, and Elijah nodded in agreement. And Malcolm continued, "Thomas will be overseeing the financial structure of the new division and helping integrate it with our existing departments." Elijah glanced at Thomas, who met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Blackwood's experience will be a great asset," Elijah said diplomatically. Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been doing some reflection, Mr. Johnson, and some research. The accessible technology market has grown exponentially in the past decade. There's both a social good and a sound business opportunity here." For the next hour, they outlined the vision for the new division. Dr. Mitchell provided insights into the current needs of the deaf community, while Thomas, showing a side of himself Elijah hadn't seen before, offered practical advice on structuring the team and securing internal resources. As the meeting concluded, Malcolm walked them to the door. "We'll make the official announcement tomorrow. I expect great things from this team." The hallway, Thomas turned to Elijah. "Johnson, I've been thinking about what you said in the boardroom, about communication being the foundation of everything we do." He paused. "You were right, and it took someone your age to remind me of what I used to know when I was starting out." "We all lose sight of things sometimes, sir," Elijah replied. "What matters is finding our way back." Over the next 6 months, Westfield's accessible communications division grew rapidly under Elijah's leadership. With Dr. Mitchell's guidance and Thomas's business acumen, they developed new technologies that bridged communication gaps not just for the deaf community, but for people with various disabilities. What began as a confrontation in a boardroom transformed into a collaboration that changed the company's direction, and in many ways, returned it to its roots. Thomas found new purpose in mentoring Elijah, sharing decades of business wisdom while learning from the younger man's fresh perspective and personal connection to their mission. In December, Westfield hosted a launch event for their first major product release, an integrated communication system that seamlessly connected users regardless of hearing ability. The Chicago Tribune ran a feature story with a photograph that echoed the one in Malcolm's office from 1972. Malcolm Reynolds and Elijah Johnson standing proudly beside their new technology, bridging generations and experiences. At the reception following the launch, Elijah found a moment alone with Malcolm. "I never properly thanked you," Elijah said, "for giving me this opportunity, for believing in me." Malcolm smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "You earned it, son." "But do you know what really caught my attention that day in the boardroom?" "What's that, sir?" "It wasn't just that you stood up to Thomas, it's that you did it with respect. You defended Dr. Mitchell's dignity without attacking him. That's rare, especially in someone so young." Elijah thought about this. "My mother taught me that how you stand up for people matters as much as the standing up itself." Malcolm nodded appreciatively. "Wise woman, your mother." He glanced across the room to where Thomas was engaged in conversation with Dr. Mitchell, their earlier animosity replaced by genuine collegiality. "And sometimes, when we give people the chance to be better, they surprise us." The evening wound down, and as guests began to leave, Dr. Mitchell approached Elijah, her hands moving gracefully in sign. "6 months ago, I was ready to tell Malcolm that Westfield had lost its way," she signed. "Now I'm proud to be associated with the company again." "Thank you for being the catalyst." Elijah smiled, signing back. "Sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to change everything." As Dr. Mitchell left, Thomas joined Elijah by the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Not bad for your first product launch, Johnson." "I had good teachers," Elijah replied, "both in and out of the boardroom." Thomas chuckled. "I deserved that." He grew serious. "You know, I've been with Westfield most of my adult life. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what we were really about, started seeing numbers instead of people. And now I'm remembering why I joined in the first place, back when I was not much older than you are now." He extended his hand. "Thank you for the reminder." As they shook hands, Elijah realized that the events of that fateful day in the boardroom had transformed not just his own life, but had rippled outward, affecting Thomas, the company, and countless users of their new technology. One small act of standing up for what was right had set in motion changes none of them could have predicted. Later that night, Elijah video called his mother to share the success of the launch. As they signed back and forth, he told her about the day's events and the journey of the past 6 months. "I'm so proud of you," she signed, her eyes shining. "You found your purpose." "I was thinking about Dad today," Elijah signed. "About how he always said that a single moment of courage can change everything." His mother nodded, her expression softening at the mention of his father. "He was right, and so were you that day in the boardroom." As they said goodnight, Elijah looked out at the city lights from his apartment window, reflecting on the unexpected path his life had taken. What had begun as a simple act of interpreting for a deaf guest had become so much more a reawakening of a company's founding values, a bridge between generations, and the beginning of his own legacy. In that moment, Elijah understood what both Malcolm Reynolds and his father had known. Sometimes the most important communication isn't about the words we say or sign, but about the connections we forge when we truly see and hear each other. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.